We Three Kings by J. M. Bullen. Chapter 1, 8:30 to 9:15 p.m. It did not start in the bustling streets for the Christmas Eve shoppers, largely made up of harassed parents and manic-looking last-minute men. It did not start in the cinemas or the theatres or the winking grottos or on the ice rinks with children overloaded on anticipation, being wrangled by grandparents on babysitting duties. It did not start in busy thoroughfares or city streets where the grinding, blinding traffic moved at the speed of an ice age, sorely testing the Christmas cheer of any driver. It did not even start in a cosy home festooned with evergreen offcuts and lights that twinkled and winked and glimmered and shimmered through the spectrum. No, this story started on a dark and empty road several miles outside the city suburbs, where the silhouettes from a forest of sturdy pines could barely be glimpsed in the headlights of what looked like an ordinary security van. But the cargo the van was carrying was not money, nor precious goods. It was living. A transfer of prisoners. Loud, uncomfortable and cramped. The long stretch of time in the van had been demanding enough on the driver and the prison officer, especially when sat in stationary Christmas Eve traffic jams for several hours. But it was even harder on the 5 prisoners locked in their tiny compartments in the back of the van. The 5 inmates resembled men in separate confessionals, patiently waiting for absolution from a priest who was already making them endure their penance. 3 of them were dressed in sweatshirts and tracksuit bottoms, one in a brightly coloured boiler suit, easily identifiable in the event of an escape. The 5th had been taken directly from court in his bespoke suit. "God rest ye merry, gentlemen," belted out Cosmo Shanks, the big, bearded, boiler-suited prison veteran who'd been trying to stimulate a back-of-the-van carol service for the last 30 miles. "Let nothing you dismay." "Come on! Ye are the gentlemen, all of ye. Too much dismay, not enough merry. I do requests." "How about Silent Night, Cosmo?" asked Bob Butcher, with the stress on silent. "Way!" Bob Butcher wades him the funnies. Cosmo Shanks seemed delighted he'd finally got a reaction. "Give us something else to laugh at then, Butch, other than your facial hair." "What's wrong with my tash?" "Marley?" Cosmo was determined to engage the whole van load of prisoners. "What's wrong with Butch's tash?" "It's a little 70s, Butch," replied the soft voice of Marley Jakes apologetically. "You know, it's got a bit of a prog rock roadie gone to seed vibe." Butch was silent for a moment. "What do you know about facial hair, Jakes? You dream of facial hair. You're not man enough for this facial hair, you woofter." "I agree with you there," Marley Jakes countered. "Oh, is it woofter now? It was poofter early on. I might be upgraded or downgraded, Butch. Do tell." "You're a poofter and a woofter and a homo," declared Bob Butcher. "We're getting in the Christmas spirit now, aren't we, fellas?" goaded Cosmo. "Goodwill to all men, the lot." "Homo, love it," Marley laughed. "You know, homo comes from the Greek for same. By calling me a homo, you're just saying same. You the same as me, Butch?" Bob Butcher was silent for a moment or two. "You said you liked my tash, Jakes." "No, I didn't." "Oh, yes, you did." "No, I didn't." "Way!" Cosmo's voice rang out jubilantly and was accompanied with a clap or two. "I wanted a carol service, but even better, we got ourselves a pantomime. Oh, yes, we have. Hear that, Eastie? Hear that, suit man? It's a pantomime show with a twirly moustache villain and a dame over here. Proper Christmas, past the mince pies." "Belt up, Cosmo," Butch replied. "Jakes, you said to me your tash suited you." Marley upped the volume over Butch. "And so it does, because—" "Don't take this badly, Butch. You're a bit of an unreconstructed male. Doesn't mean I like it, but it suits you." "Carols, pantomime, now we're playing truthful dare games," Cosmo's voice rang out. "Love it. Genuine Christmas." "Hey, suit guy. You, straight from court. Cosmo Shanks coaxed. Truth or dare? What did you do, and how long they sent you down for? Finally, there came a plaintive reply from the cubicle, the first the man had uttered since stepping out of court. Fraud. 3 years. 3 years? You'll do that in no time. Cosmo decided to embody the spirit of benevolence. I've done over half my 5 already, and I did 3 the previous stretch before that. Whoa! Did everyone feel that? Back tires just slid out from under us. Easty, how are you holding up, lad? How are you doing, Raff? Asked the softer voice of Marley Jakes. Still with us? Rafferty East had spoken barely a word for the entire journey. Want to be somewhere else. Need to be. None of us wish we were here, complained Bob Butcher. Yeah, but Easty has a better reason than most, explained Cosmo, in as close to a sympathetic voice as the van's jester could muster. Why? Asked the fraudster in the suit. Your Annabelle full term, Marley asked gently. Week early. Week's nothing, replied Cosmo. Your babe's getting early release for good behaviour. Christmas Eve birthday, though. That's hard on a kid. 364 days of no presents and a 2-day deluge. Know what flavour it is yet, Easty? We didn't want to know if it was a boy or a girl until the baby was born, Rafferty East replied in a flat tone. Just look at your time away from them like you was a soldier on a tour duty, Cosmo declared. You're serving your time, finishing your tour, and then it's back home to the ones you love. But it's now, Cosmo. The time is now, Rafferty East replied, then added so quietly it was as if to himself. I was supposed to be with her for the birth. I'm meant to be with her. I should be with her. In the cab of the van, both the driver and the detention custody officer peered up between the tops of the forest of pine trees into the dark sky. The swollen clouds seemed to droop downwards, threatening biblical precipitation, but for the last few hours the clouds had been doing the same with no noticeable result. Like a fake Santa Claus, the clouds are all promise and no delivery. That December had brought hard frosts and many days of rain, but now the cold east winds came without any sort of herald, turning standing water into glassy ice. No white Christmas yet again. People were finding it hard to remember the last white Christmas. Cold front moving in, they still haven't gritted these roads, complained the driver. Guess this sort of road isn't a priority. That or the gritters have got stuck in the Christmas Eve traffic. It's quite loud back there. Let them have their bit of Christmas cheer, the custody officer returned. It's only Shanks giving his 9 lessons and carols. Bet there won't be much Christmas cheer for East, though. Poor bloke applies for compassionate leave to attend the birth of his child, may not even make it on time. Shouldn't have done the crime then, the driver replied, like the sharp retort of a gavel on wood. But receiving a few stolen goods over missing the birth of your child? Not sure it's a sentence East deserved. He's not a fence, and these aren't island thugs. Apart from Shanks and Butcher, who put the con in misconduct, these are first-timers. Is it such a push to see ourselves reflected back? Lose this job, miss a couple of rent payments, unreliable work, uncertain wages, unwise choices, debt and desperation? Is it such a stretch to think that there but for the grace of? Asked the custody officer. Even though he did not reply, the driver's lingering sidelong look suggested he was unconvinced and still certain there was a considerable daylight between him and those he was transporting. Silence filled the cab like a bloated, uninvited passenger wedged between the two men. When it came, the custody officer's change of focus jarred slightly. What time do you think we might make it to the prison then? He asked, adjusting the van's heater to give a warmer blast of air. Need to try to make it to midnight mass. Reckon you'll make midnight mass. Now we're actually moving, declared the driver. You religious then? Not at all, but it's family tradition. Isn't that what the season's all about? Family? Tradition? Isn't that what they tell us? The driver nodded unconvincingly. The wife would have done most of the rapping by the time I'm done, but I still got her present too. Hell! The country lane was dark and damp. With patches of water frosted into marbled ice. When the van's near side wheels slid on a frozen puddle, the driver applied the brakes but found the van unresponsive. Overcompensating on the steering, the driver forced the van to veer off across into the other lane and then swerve back again. However, instead of gripping tarmac, the wheel skidded across another patch of smooth ice, causing the prison van to slew off the road, down a shallow embankment where the vehicle was eviscerated by the jagged limb of a fallen tree. One side of the van unzipped with a crunching, wrenching, tearing sound. A splintering branch of the fallen tree suddenly punctured through the van wall like a huge phantom finger of fate, passed mere inches from Rafferty East's face, then travelled on to slice through Bob Butcher's compartment. All the van's occupants were then pitched forward and back again as the vehicle slammed to a stop. A moment's silence. Cosmo Shanks piped up. "Everyone alive and upright?" 3 inmates eventually let out dazed murmurs of assent. "Hey, you're all right up front," yelled Cosmo. He gave a sharp whistle. "Up front! You okay?" There was no answer. Most of the prisoners shouted again and pounded the doors of their compartments. From his oblique view through the door hatch, Rafferty East could see no glimpse of movement from the cab of the van. No reaction whatsoever. The prisoners were trapped in their cubicles in a crashed van through which the frigid night air was already beginning to seep and steal. With his back jammed against the door of his compartment, Rafferty wedged his feet against the torn side of the van and pushed hard against either side of the ripped and buckled gash created by the tree branch. After some pounding and kicking and battering at the more ragged edges, Rafferty managed to force a gap wide enough to thread himself through the jagged wound in the vehicle, largely avoided its lethally sharp edges, and tumbled out into the pine forest floor. It was a biting, knifing night, with bulging clouds overhead appearing as if they were brewing something apocalyptic. The prison-issue sweatshirt and jogging bottoms offered little protection from the chill wind. A glance at the tyre tracks and the tunnel of broken branches told Rafferty East all he needed to know. The prison van had veered off the road, narrowly missed several firs, then had impaled itself upon a fallen tree before finally colliding with a tall, robust pine. And the entire crash scene was hidden from the road. Opening up the front cab, Rafferty had to catch the driver's unconscious body before it flopped out onto the forest floor. Both the custody officer and the driver were alive, but unconscious. Rafferty seized the keys, unlocked the back of the vehicle and released Marley and Cosmo. Nothing could prepare them for what they were to witness when they opened up Bob Butcher's compartment. Bob Butcher had been sat in the compartment behind Rafferty's. The dead tree branch which so narrowly missed Rafferty had not missed Bob. Not only had the branch crushed him against the back wall of his compartment, but it had pierced deep into his torso too. Bob Butcher was quite dead. Fortunately, he seemed to have died instantly. His face bore an expression of quizzical surprise, as if he'd been sneaking a bite of Christmas pudding and had chomped down on an unexpected coin. "Ah, Butch," Cosmo sighed. "You surely were a pain in my arse, chap. But you didn't deserve this." The slight, androgynous figure of Marley Jakes knelt down. Slim fingers traced both strands of Butch's long horseshoe moustache. "I take it back, Butch. It's a fine tash. A prince of tashes." Finally, Rafferty opened the door to the convicted fraudster, still in his suit from the court appearance. "I'm staying right here," the man declared, refusing to even face his fellow inmates. "I refuse to be a fugitive on the run. I've too much to lose." "Stay then," Rafferty replied. "But the situation is this. The van is buried in a tree fairly deep into the wood on a quiet road where no one would see it anyway. Just over there, Bob Butcher is dead, impaled on a fallen tree branch that ripped through the side of the van. You have our 2 prison guards knocked unconscious by a crash out front, and you are intending to remain in a van sliced open to the elements in late December with no source of power or heat. We're not angling to be fugitives on the run, but we do need to call this in. The situation demands help. Still want to stay?" Moments later, the 4 inmates stood beside the front cab of the van, reluctant to simply abandon Butch and the 2 unconscious prison officers, and also reluctant to start the long slog in the unforgiving wind. Rafferty unsuccessfully tried to use the custody officers' phones, but both devices had taken severe knocks in the crash and were damaged beyond use. "Shouldn't we put them in the recovery position?" asked Marley. "Risk leaving them exposed to the cold on the forest floor," Cosmo cautioned. "Nah, we check their breathing. Keep them in a decent position to shelter the cab, at least it gives them some protection, and pray they'll come around soon, although we've got help to them." Ransacking the first aid kit, Cosmo removed the 2 triangular bandages and tied the material to one of the branches of the trees beside the road, where they flapped vigorously in the east wind as a marker of the crash site. Finally, having done as much as they could for the men left living in the van, the 4 prisoners stood in respectful silence for a few moments to mark the passing of Bob Butcher, then braced themselves against the cold march along the road. Hope suddenly leapt up in them as a car approached. All 4 men stood waving frantically at the vehicle, which slowed down, then accelerated away quickly. "Jerk!" yelled Marley at the disappearing car. "Goodwill to all men, I was told," bellowed Cosmo. "Can you blame 'em?" Rafferty replied. "Look at us. You're on your own in a car, driving on a dark country lane with no one else around, and we suddenly emerge in the headlights in our standard issue prison clobber and Cosmo in his escape risk boiler suit. Would you just stop to pick us up? Both Cosmo and Marley acknowledged the sense in what their fellow inmate was saying. I never stop either, the man in the bespoke suit declared, turning his collar up against the wind. Not for beggars on the street, not for hitchhikers, not for charity workers rattling their boxes, not for sponges, not for any of them. As I taught my children, those pleaders and beggars who show no shame must realise they've only themselves to blame. His three fellow prisoners were silent for a moment, regarding the suited man as if he was an alien visitation. What's your name? Asked Cosmo. The man in the suit craned his head away and took several moments to answer. He was clearly weighing up whether divulging such information to an old lag like Cosmo Shanks might be storing up trouble for the future, with the consequences of being rude to a potentially violent veteran like Cosmo Shanks on an isolated country road in the dark. Mantle? Robin Mantle? Well, Mantle, Robin Mantle, you a twat. Cosmo Shanks marched away down the road. Having comprehensively captured their own thoughts on the suited man too, Rafferty East and Marley Jakes joined him. Beside them, the night forest creaked and sighed as if carrying its own whispered secrets of the hushed news that the men were on the run, while the four prisoners trudged along the hard, occasionally slippery surface of the road towards the distant inviting glow of the city on the horizon.